When we think of women of influence in Scripture, we do not have a shortage of names. Names such as Mary and Elizabeth and Eve and the Proverbs 31 woman might come to mind. But there are so many examples in Scriptures from which we could draw um, significant application to our lives that I believe we need to examine the full counsel of Scripture and even sometimes look at the narratives that involve characters that are not as well known as, say, Mary or Eve or Elizabeth, so on and so forth. And that's where we find ourselves in this upcoming Sunday morning sermon. We're going to be discussing two women. One will serve as an example of a worldly woman, of a wicked influence in the lives of her son and of her children. And this woman is named Athaliah. Athaliah is significant because she is the granddaughter of King Omri. Her parents are Ahab and Jezebel. And so just to kind of describe her lineage, Ahab being a very wicked king in Israel in the northern kingdom, and his wife Jezebel, whose name is still a slang term for women who are wicked, even today in our culture. And so you have Athaliah. Her husband would be Jehoram. He would be a king in Judah, and he would also be wicked. And so she comes from a wicked lineage. She marries a king who is wicked, and she is going to produce offspring, King Ahaziah, who is wicked as well. And we're going to find in our narrative today that she actually tries to kill her grandson. She does succeed in killing some, but she tries to kill all of her grandchildren. And then we're going to find a godly woman. We're going to find the example of a godly woman in the character named Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat is the wife of Jehoiada, who is a well-celebrated priest in the history of Israel, a man who brought about significant spiritual reform, but a man whose works really can be attributed not just to himself, but to the work that he did with his wife. And we're going to find in this narrative, as we read through this historical narrative, how his wife acted heroically, how she was a godly influence in the life of a young boy. He was 1 when she first made an influence in his life. He was 7 when he became king, so King Joash. And so picking up in 2 Chronicles chapter 22, and again, I strongly encourage you to read the 22nd and 23rd chapter of 2 Chronicles in preparing your heart for the Sunday morning worship service, as this narrative might not be very familiar to all believers, and I really want you to be able to follow the sermon on Sunday. But it says, the people of Jerusalem made Ahaziah, Jehoram's youngest son, king in his place, since the raiders who came with the Arabs into the camp had killed all the older sons. So Ahaziah, king of Jehoram's, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 1 year, not very long. His mother's name was Athaliah, a granddaughter of Omri. He too walked in the ways of the house of Ahab. That is not a positive statement. Ahab again was a wicked king. For his mother encouraged him in doing wrong. We find that this man, he's a young man when he becomes king, he has wicked influencers. His mother, his grandparents were evil. And his mother uniquely is influencing him to do wrong. And so what do you expect his reign is going to be like? Is it going to be pleasing to God? No. It says, he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as the house of Ahab had done. For after his father's death, they became his advisors to his undoing. He surrounds himself not just with his mother's wicked influence, but even with others who are like-minded. He also followed their counsel when he went with Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, to war against Hazael, king of Aram, at Ramoth Gilead. We're going to find that he goes down. He's assisting, so he partners with the king of Israel. He is the king of Judah. These are two separate kingdoms in this time period, and this is a foolish plan. We see that King Joram is injured. And it says, then Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to Jezreel to see Joram, son of Ahab, because he had been wounded. Through Ahaziah's visit to Joram, God brought about Ahaziah's downfall. When Ahaziah arrived, he went out to Joram to meet Jehu, son of Nimshi, whom the Lord had anointed to destroy the house of Ahab. While Jehu was executing judgment on the house of Ahab, he found the princes of Judah and the sons of Ahaziah's relatives who had been attending Ahaziah, and he killed them. Then he went in search of Ahaziah, and his men captured him while he was hiding in Samaria. He was brought to Jehu and put to death. So we find the king of Judah is visiting the king of Israel who has been wounded. Jehu comes and he slaughters those belonging to the household of Joram. And then he finds that, wait a minute, I get a bonus here. I'm trying to kill the descendants of King Ahab, and here is this king Ahaziah. I'm going to kill him too. So his people bring him to him, and Ahaziah is put to death at the hands of Jehu. It says they buried him, for they said he was a son of Jehoshaphat, who sought the Lord with all his heart. That would be his grandfather, actually. So there was no one in the house of Ahaziah powerful enough to retain the kingdom. What happens when there is a power vacuum? When there are not good, qualified leaders in a nation? Well, there is going to be a pursuit of power. There's going to be a power struggle. And sometimes it is somebody who's exceedingly wicked who is going to assume that position of power. Power vacuums are not good places for any nation to be, and yet that is where Judah found itself in this moment. There's no good king, nobody who's powerful enough as a descendant of Ahaziah to reign. So what's going to happen? Well, in the 10th verse, we find the reappearance of Ahaziah, or Athaliah, the wicked queen, the wife of Jehoram, who has been killed, and the granddaughter of King Omri, and the daughter of King Ahab. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family of the house of Judah, meaning that she's literally looking at who the relatives of her grandson were, and she's trying to kill them. She's trying to identify who her grandchildren are, and she's trying to kill all of them, all of her grandkids. Why? Because she wants the power for herself. It says, but, and this is important, but Jehoshaphat, the daughter of King Jehoram, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the royal princes who were about to be murdered, and put him and his nurse in a bedroom, because Jehoshaphat, the daughter of King Jehoram and the wife of the priest Jehoiada, was Ahaziah's sister. She hid the child from Athaliah so that she could not kill him. He remained hidden with them in the temple of God for 6 years while Athaliah ruled the land. What happens here? I just used a lot of tough names. This might have been difficult to follow. Athaliah wants to kill her grandchildren because they are a threat to her throne. She wants to rule in place of her son who has been killed, in place of her husband who is dead. She wants to be the queen, the ruler, and she does serve as queen for 6 years. At this time period, though, this wife of a priest, Jehoiada, his wife, Jehoshaphat, she steps in and she recognizes that there's this baby. He's 1 year old, Joash. And she says, we need to protect him. He will be the rightful king. He is the heir of the promise, and that's going to be important, of the covenant of God, and I'm going to protect him. And what she does as a godly influence, so Athaliah is a wicked influencer. She wants power. She wants to follow the wicked upbringing that she has. She desires to rebel against God's plan to have somebody from the lineage of David sit on the throne. Because of that, and because she's so consumed with power, she's willing to put anyone to death who stands in her way. Along the way, she was willing to influence her son in such devastatingly terrible directions that it actually cost her son his life. He was killed as a direct consequence of obeying the sort of influence of his wicked mother. But in this moment, you have this other woman step in, and she's not a mother. At least she's not Joash's mother. She steps in, and she says, God has called me, basically. She doesn't say this explicitly, but this is the way she behaves. God has called me to be a godly influence in his life. I will protect him. I will have foresight, not just to see my own power and my opportunity, but to see the bigger picture of what God is doing. And so in faith, I'm going to put my life on the line to protect this boy. And you know where she hides him? She hides him in the temple. Now, she hides him in the temple likely out of convenience because her husband is the high priest. What better place to hide a little child than in the temple where her husband and his like-minded men can protect this little baby who is later going to be the king. But also think about this opportunity that's presented. She is a godly woman. Her husband is a God-fearing man. She recognized this is an opportunity for this child not to grow up around the influences of such wicked people and a household of people who want to destroy him, but instead, this is a boy who's going to grow up around priests who love God, who are serving him, that he might have an opportunity to walk in paths that honor God, not according to the program of his forefathers. What a great opportunity is afforded to this man. And by the way, throughout the lifetime of Jehoiada, the high priest, Joash, would live a godly life, a life that was pleasing to him, although later in life he would rebel. Where am I going with this whole story? Well, we could spend some time developing all of their actions and the consequences for them, and I'm going to do that on Sunday morning in much greater detail. But today I want us to think about this. What is the difference between Athaliah and Jehoshaphat, really? Why are their actions different? Why are their behaviors so radically different? Why is their perspective of the same situation, of the same little boy? Athaliah sees him as a threat. Jehoshaphat sees him as an heir to the promise. Why is their perspective different? Well, we need to understand that as people of influence, we can only influence people according to what is true about our nature. And Athaliah rejected the Lord. She was not a follower of God. Her heart was far from him. So any kind of influence she could give, even if it wasn't so overtly terrible, even if it wasn't to kill him, even if it wasn't just obviously wicked advice that she was giving to her son, for instance, Ahaziah, the direction she was going to lead was going to be something negative because her heart was far from the Lord. But Jehoshaphat, because she loves God, because she's called according to his purpose, because her heart is sensitive to God's promises and she trusts them, she's willing to act heroically. At the end of the day, the influence that we make in other people's lives is a direct reflection of our heart for the Lord. Do we know Jesus Christ? Do we love him? Do we trust him, even in situations that appear not to be certain for us at all or to provide safety? Are we willing to trust God? I encourage you this week to read through 2 Chronicles 22 and 23 and to ask, where's my heart? Do I trust the Lord? Do I love him? When I give people advice, does it stem from myself or does it come from the word of the Lord? Do I trust in God's promises to such an extent that it overflows in all areas of my life? I really look forward to unpacking that further with you on Sunday morning. May God bless you.